We talk a lot about faith, we in the Christian church. It has become one of those words we use repeatedly, but often do not pause to reflect on. What is faith, after all? There are lots of available definitions. The Westminster Shorter Catechism, that redoubt of English Reformed thought, asks and answers it this way. Question: what is faith in Jesus Christ? Answer: faith in Jesus Christ is a saving grace whereby we receive and rest upon Him alone for salvation as He is offered to us in the gospel. Not exactly a definition that sends us out into the streets armed with zeal for the gospel, but there it is. My point is, faith is something we talk about, but which we don't reflect upon all that often. In today's epistle reading from the daily lectionary, the writer of the letter to the Hebrews gives us a rather punchy and memorable definition that has stood the test of time. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Monday, January 29th, 2024. When we left off last week, our writer was encouraging his people to persevere in the faith in spite of the difficulties they faced. He first gave them a warning about the consequences of once relying on the saving sacrifice of Jesus Christ and then turning away when the going got difficult. Then he turned his rhetoric around to offer words of encouragement by reminding them what their identity was. They were the faithful who would not abandon the faith. He closed the section by reminding them, "But we are not among those who shrink back and so are lost, but among those who have faith and so are saved." We are among those who have faith, which naturally begs the question, what is faith? Now he turns his attention to this very question, beginning with his pithy definition. He writes, "Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Indeed, by faith our ancestors received approval. By faith we understand that the worlds were prepared by the word of God, so that what is seen was made from things that are not visible." The assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. There are many ways we could define faith, but not many have the power of this simple definition, and it is a definition that fits the circumstances his congregation faced. Again, they felt themselves to be a beleaguered minority, surrounded by people and powers hostile to their faith, who threatened not only their social and economic status, but even their physical safety, and perhaps even their very lives. For them, adhering to the Christian faith wasn't something one took lightly. They knew they were playing for keeps. People like that want something tangible to hold on to, some way to trust that their faith wasn't in vain. But because faith is faith, our writer cannot give them the kind of assurance, an army, say, or a police force, that would reassure them that their trials were not in vain. What he does do is he gives them the next best thing, a reminder that faith is its own assurance. But if this were all he had said on the subject, it may not have been enough to motivate them to persevere. So he gives them something more, examples of faith in action. Starting with Abel, he recounts a series of figures we know from the Old Testament, and how through faith they not only did what they needed to do, but, and this is where he's going with all of this, they were counted as acceptable to God. He writes, "By faith Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain's. Through this he received approval as righteousness." God himself giving approval to his gifts. He died, but through his faith he still speaks. By faith Enoch was taken so that he did not experience death, and he was not found because God had taken him. For it was attested before he was taken away that he had pleased God. And without faith it is impossible to please God, for whoever would approach him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. The writer continues by talking about Noah and then Abraham, Two people who had faith enough to obey God's commands when those commands seemed absolutely absurd. A flood to cover the earth? Absurd. An old man and an old woman having a child together? Preposterous. And that's his point. In order to motivate his frightened flock to persevere, he points to the faith of heroes, great and small, throughout the Old Testament, who persevered in their faith and received God's approval, even when to believe defied all human logic. Was it enough to motivate his flock? Well, we'll never really know, but we do know this, that these words have continued to inspire the faithful right down to our own time. Faith, the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Tomorrow, the writer continues with his honor roll of the faithful. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.